care what your little map says, you are encroaching on common property, and you need to remove that structure immediately.
The first time the yellow boot hit my tire, it was still dark enough to see my breath, and the courthouse floodlights made the whole street look like a crime scene. It was May 3, 2024, 4:27 a.m., and the air smelled like wet asphalt and burnt coffee from the gas station across the road. I'd been sitting on the old stone porch rail for maybe 2 minutes, waiting for my cousin to finish jury duty pickup, when Karen marched up in a neon HOA vest like she owned the entire town. She slapped a ticket on my windshield so hard the paper fluttered like a moth, then pointed at me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I blinked at the ticket and laughed because it made no sense. It said HOA violation, unauthorized loitering on community property, fine due in 10 days, amount, $175. I looked at the courthouse seal carved into the stone steps and said, "This is literally the county courthouse." Karen didn't blink. She said, "This block is inside our association boundaries. We keep it clean. We keep people moving." Then she added the line that made my stomach drop, "HOA ticketed me for sitting on the courthouse steps porch rail." That I pulled the survey, like it was some cute slogan she'd been waiting to use on somebody. She made a little note on her clipboard and told me if I argued, she'd call it in as trespassing. Later that morning, I tried to be normal about it. I emailed the HOA office, then I walked in during open hours with my ticket and a calm voice. The lobby smelled like lemon cleaner and cheap printer ink. The receptionist wouldn't even take the paper from my hand. She just said, "You have to file an appeal online." I did. I sent screenshots of the courthouse address, a link to the county website, and a photo of the stone rail under the courthouse flag. No answer for 6 days. When they finally replied, it was one line, "Appeal denied. Fine stands." I ran into 2 neighbors outside my building and asked if this was real. They looked over their shoulders like Karen might pop out of a bush. One whispered, "Don't fight her. She calls the cops on people." The other just shook his head and said, "The board always backs her." That's when I hit my line in the sand. I'm not a loud person, but I hate being treated like I'm stupid. I promised myself I would keep it lawful, boring, and unstoppable. No yelling. No pranks. Just proof. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a cheap desk lamp and started building my case like I was studying for a test. I lined up photos, emails, and call logs in a binder. I printed the ticket. I printed the denial. I wrote down dates and times. I even wrote a plain little note on a sticky pad, "Patterns of false reports can be prosecuted." Because that was the part that bothered me most. It wasn't the money. It was the threat. If she could pretend the courthouse steps were hers, she could pretend anything. So I went where lies hate to go, public records. On May 10, 2024, at 9 a.m., I walked into the county clerk's office and asked for the plat maps and boundary documents for our subdivision, plus anything tied to the courthouse lot line. The clerk didn't even look surprised. He handed me a request form and said, "You want the whole packet or just the last survey?" I said, "Whole packet." 2 hours later, the file landed with 63 pages. I carried it out like it weighed 100 pounds. In the parking lot, I flipped through and saw it right there in clean black lines. The courthouse steps and that porch rail were county property, and the HOA boundary stopped short by almost 20 feet. I called a licensed surveyor the same day and paid him $350 to confirm it. He marked the corners with little flags like tiny, smug trophies. I didn't storm into the HOA office. I waited for the next board meeting because Karen loved an audience. The community room was packed on May 21, 2024, and you could feel the tension like static. Karen sat up front with her clipboard, smiling like she was the judge. When my turn came, I stood up with my binder and my calm face. I said, I'm here about the ticket you gave me on May 3rd at 4:27 a.m. Karen cut in and said, he was loitering on our property. I slid a copy of the survey onto the table. Then I slid the county plat map. Then I read one sentence I'd practiced in the mirror. Timeline item 1 April 5th at 4:27 a.m. false trespass call. Karen's smile twitched because she recognized the time. I kept going, showing the surveyor's stamp, the boundary line, and the part where the courthouse lot was clearly labeled county-owned. Someone in the back whispered, "Oh my gosh," and I heard a phone camera start recording. The room changed fast. People leaned forward. A guy in a work uniform laughed under his breath and said, "She's been doing this for years." Karen tried to grab the papers like she could erase them with her hands, but the board president held up his palm. He asked me, "Are you saying the HOA has been issuing tickets on county land?" I said, "Yes, and I have evidence it wasn't just me." I showed 3 other complaints I found in the HOA emails from neighbors who had been fined for the same spot, totaling $525. That's when Karen did the worst thing for herself. She stood up and said, "Fine, I'll call the police right now." She actually pulled her phone out, right there, in front of everyone, like it was a magic wand. 2 minutes later, an officer showed up because the courthouse station is literally across the street. People were still filming. Karen pointed at me and said, "Trespasser." The officer looked at the paperwork, looked at the courthouse seal, and then looked at Karen like she just tried to argue with gravity. The authority flip was almost funny. The officer asked, "Ma'am, do you have any proof this is HOA property?" Karen stuttered and said, "Everyone knows it is." The officer turned to the board and said, "The county owns those steps. If you're issuing tickets there, that's not your jurisdiction." Then he glanced at my timeline notes and asked quietly, "You said false reports?" I nodded and showed him the call log I pulled from my phone records and the city's incident report number that matched Karen's last threat. The officer's face went flat. He said, "Making repeated false reports is serious." He asked Karen for her name and ID. Karen tried to laugh it off, but her laugh cracked. The board president looked like he might faint. Someone in the back said, "Karen's getting Karen," and the whole room snorted. After that, everything got very official, very fast. The board voted that night to void my fine and refund the 3 other people who came forward. 2 days later, a county property manager emailed the HOA a warning about misrepresenting public property, and the city attorney copied the board on it. Karen didn't get hauled off in handcuffs or anything dramatic like that, but she did get something worse to her ego: consequences on paper. She was removed from the compliance committee the next week, and the board announced that any future enforcement would require verified parcel maps before tickets went out. The neighborhood felt lighter. People started saying hi again. An older lady brought me banana bread and said, "Thank you for standing up without turning it ugly." I told her I just wanted the truth to win. And honestly, watching Karen shrink under her own nonsense was the sweetest, most lawful revenge I've ever seen. Please follow for more HOA showdowns like this. Do you think she got what she deserves? Comment below.